Dave Rossi had a profound extraterrestrial contact experience, and as a result of that, he began to have dreams and visions of mathematical formulas and inventions. He began working and communicating with different top level scientists who are unnamed, and he's been encouraged to develop some of these inventions. And he has now applied for his first patents. And his patent applications are astounding in their implications. And today we have a special announcement with Dave Rossi about how his anti-gravity patent can change the world.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome back, Dave, to Exopolitics Today.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I truly appreciate you having me on again, and it's an honor to be here.
Well, I know that you've been working with a number of top scientists and I guess corporations concerning the different inventions and the formulas that you've been able to develop as a result of your contact experience. And I thought it was quite special that you actually have applied for your first two patents that you showed me, your two patent applications, and we can't reveal those. There are reasons why that you can't do that you'll explain. But I think it's quite a big step. I mean, did you ever see yourself, a few years ago, actually applying for patents at the U.S. Patents and Trademarks Office?
Well, first off, let me just say very kindly that, again, thank you so much to yourself and to your lovely audience for having me. There's more than two. The two that you had a glance at certainly are, dare I say, at the very least, revolutionary. Now, to be fair and clear, I'm definitely not the first to have attempted to develop various forms of such apparatuses and energies, but honestly, even up until 6 months ago, I couldn't have seen myself trying to file anything, to be honest.
Well, I guess that just kind of shows the profound, how profound the contact experience was, and how that activated certain abilities, triggered maybe portions of the brain, where all of a sudden these mathematical formulas and inventions suddenly became clear. And we mentioned this the last time we talked, but my Army insider, JP, went through the same thing back in 2008. And when you described what you were going through, I thought, well, this is exactly what JP described. So I can really relate to what has happened, this incredible transformation.
It's something that I think people like yourself and people definitely like those of within your audience could certainly relate to. It seems like different experiences seem to enable or activate, for lack of a better description, different abilities or capabilities within individuals. I mean, we've seen, for example, a recent, if I'm not mistaken, announcement about a large book publication picking up the rights to a book of an individual that was able to find evidence that they were involved in United States Air Force programs when they were much younger. Except up until a handful of months ago, they were not able to recall such experiences and what have you. So I'm paraphrasing here, but it's something that is certainly common amongst a myriad of people. Yeah.
No, I definitely would like to hear more about that book and the person involved in that. Now, the first patent that you sent me, and as you said, there's more than two. But these are two that you showed me, and I think it's important to say, because people, often ask, well, how do we know this person is the real deal? And to me, when a person files for a patent at the U.S. Patent and Trademarks Office, that shows just the level of seriousness of what it is that person has put their time into, because it's not an easy thing to file a patent. Now, the other aspect, of course, is whether the patent will be awarded. So, we're waiting for that, because that'll be another important bridge. But still, I think it's quite significant that it's only fairly recently that you had these kind of like experiences and these abilities coming online. And so here's the fruit of that. One of the concrete pieces of evidence that substantiates that, yeah, indeed, you are having these unique insights and knowledge of the way in which some esoteric physics principles operate. So the first patent that you sent me the application receipt for is the high frequency gravity modifier by means of plasma arc oscillation chambers. So, yeah, tell us about that.
Sure, absolutely. If it'd be all right, if you could put up the image of the what looks to be sort of a box-like device with some glowing there we go. Thank you. So what we're looking at here, folks and doctor, is we're looking at what is called, or what one could call, a plasma oscillation chamber. Now, this is actually going to be a lead up to what I wanted to announce as well. Now, with respects to this technology, as I've said when I had come onto your show a handful of months ago, there are different underlying, I guess you could say, principles that stem from a foundational trunk, just like a tree, for example. There's that main trunk that holds everything together, and then there are the different branches that extend off and from that trunk. What you see here is one of those quote unquote branches in which could be developed from the fundamental electromagnetic energy. And so what you're seeing here is what you could call a plasma oscillation chamber. Now, for those that are familiar even vaguely with electrical engineering or electricity, there comes a point where naturally electricity begins to arc, it begins to curve. And so what's interesting about this is that we find that when we notice a sort of curvature within the electrical resonance, or with an electrical spark, so to speak, we notice this also speaks to what's called angular momentum in quantum physics, which is, in my humble opinion, a fancy way for talking about curved space-time. Now, what's interesting about this particular device is that it has the ability to act as a propulsor. It also has the ability to act as a device that could emit certain types of resonant energy towards tungsten and or copper and or other metals that could cut through any solid surface like a knife through butter. It also has the ability for medical healing as well. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is a self-sustainable system, if you will, or apparatus, in the sense that the power source, ultimately, after the initial, you could say, spark, or to get it going, the power source is what you would call empty space, or the ether, or the vacuum, so to speak. And so this is essentially, I'm of the humble opinion as well, that what we're looking at here, it may in fact be what I say potentially, what the Ark of the Covenant was, particularly when you look at the structure of the design of the temple of the Ark of the Covenant. I also think as well that it correlates directly with the chakras of the human body. But at the same time, I find something very peculiar, which is that if we look at Coral Castle, Edward Lascallon, he seemed to have a very similar box type apparatus, in which he may have used in a either higher or lower level than what my intent is with the filing of this patent and such. But the idea essentially is the same concept. And he had said as well that he claimed to have discovered the secrets of the ancient Egyptians, if I'm not mistaken. And that is how he then developed the structures that he did at Coral Castle. And it is of my opinion he used an electromagnetic resonance to induce a certain frequency on tungsten rods, or any type of metal that would be a capacitor, that could then cut through a wall or a rock, or I mean, you name it, the toughest and hardest surface there is, could cut through it like literally like a knife through butter. So this is what I guess you could say, the first device and or apparatus is. Now, one thing I would like to point out before we go on is that with all of the following images, folks, that you're going to be seeing, and of course, doctor, as well, is that this energy does in fact travel either at light speed or faster than the speed of light. And one example that I've been saving to then use for this particular show here is, envision for a moment walking on the streets of New York, for example. Now, imagine in this example, there is no such thing as an underground subway station. But the subway, if there were to be one, an underground subway, travels much faster than any of the cars above ground, just in the nature of this example. Now, imagine, for example, a group of individuals within New York City realize that there's an entire world underground where there's this, this thing called a subway that's already been there that you can hop on and then use and get to places faster than others. But the rest of the city and the people in the city on the surface of the city do not know this exists. And whenever anyone tries to inquire, they just get attacked or ridiculed and get attacked with dogma claims, stigmatized, all of it. The point I'm trying to make here is I'm trying to give a very layman, simple example of what's called the ER equals EPR, or Einstein-Rosenberg bridge, which means that this energy travels through the ether. And in this example of the New York subway system, the subway is the ether transportation route. And the surface level of New York City is the reality we're all living in right now. Just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So I can say for certain that there are energies, for lack of a better description, in the ether or in the vacuum that do travel faster than the speed of light, and at the very least travel at the speed of light to induce these effects. So that is what basically that device can do.
Okay, so this device is able to extract energy, virtually unlimited energy from the ether or from the vacuum. So we're talking 0-point energy. So does this device kind of utilize the Casimir effect principle, where you have that ability to be able to generate pressure on metallic plates that are fairly close together? I think there's an image I have of the Casimir effect that shows how these plates can be pushed together by surrounding electromagnetic frequency, because inside the plates, the frequency field is not existent. So is this in any way similar to the kind of way free energy is generated in that device that you showed us?
Let me just say, Doctor, I appreciate the question extensively, because it precisely has to do with that. Essentially, what is happening is very similar to literally how, say, a male and a female give birth to a child. What happens is two separate, I guess you could say, capacitors, material that could store electrical charge and energy, need to be, not need to, but in certain instances, would be preferred if brought closer together to induce a certain effect that could only be activated topologically. Basically meaning that if we were to think of stacks of books, for example, if there were a stack of, say, 10 books, for example, we are residing on book number 10, and we think that that's all there is, but when in reality, there's another 9 books below it in which could activate such. And it's possible the Casimir effect induces this potentially an opening to the other 9 books below the surface book that we're on.
And the Ark of the Covenant, I guess that we're speculating as to what that was. So what makes you think that it was some kind of free energy device?
A couple things. It's been noted that with respects to what have been called the Levites, allegedly these Levites in which carried the ark would be known to levitate. Now, what's interesting about when they were carrying the covenant itself, what's interesting about this is that this speaks quite starkly to what we would call electrostatic resonance. Or what many others have called as well the kinetic particle theory, which is that if we are organic electrical conductors, for example, if we were to meet certain conditions where we interacted with certain other energies, we would begin to levitate off of the ground itself. That's one of the reasons I think that such would be the case. If you also compare the anatomy of the human body with the chamber in which where the Ark of the Covenant would largely and strongly reside in, the chamber itself seems to be built off of the we could say exoskeletal structure of the human body, but more so the human chakra system. And the heart, or the heart chakra, seems to be very reminiscent of that of these plasma oscillations. Now, not only that, but this also speaks to what is now being called, what our ancestors called magic, but what nowadays is being called quantum physics, with respects to the idea of non-linearity. So viewing things in a non-straight manner. So things are basically in rings, vortexes, and spirals. And so this is, again, it's a personal hypothesis of mine. It doesn't mean that I'm correct whatsoever, but it would certainly give substantiation to a lot of unclarified things in mainstream science at the very least.
Now, I mean, maybe you can clarify exactly how this kind of plasma arc operates. I mean, that seems to be an important part of this invention, this patent application that you put in. So, I mean, I guess people have images of these arcs of electricity that, say, Nikola Tesla generated using his Tesla coil. So, is this similar to what your invention device uses to be able to have the effect you desire?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I would even dare to say we can go further back and state that it is based on the fundamental principles of Pythagoras' theorem, the 2-to-1 ratio, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Very much so. I also think that when one were to, if one were to visualize that on a Cartesian plane, for example, you would have, first off, you would have in what's called involute, adiabatic, and also we could say curve-like structures that these are all fancy words for basically talking about different types of curves, loops, rings, toroid fields, you name it. And we see that very strong correlation as well with what has also been depicted on ancient cave drawings and all of that. So I certainly think that there is definitely something there. And for those that are more scientifically oriented, we can note that out of Los Alamos, I believe in approximately circa 1980s, Hochberg and Visser proved that the throat of a wormhole is, or the very center of it is all that is needed to understand about said wormhole, because then from there you can just scale and integrate, just like the Penrose stairs or Pythagoras' theorem, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that answers the question.
Another one concerns the high frequency gravity modifier description that you have for this patent. I mean, when we're talking about high frequency, are you talking about electromagnetic waves and somehow that impacts gravity, or that modifies gravity? So, I mean, does this kind of like a lot of people have been trying to develop the unified field theory that gravity and electromagnetism have some kind of interaction, or there's a formula that links the two. Is that what your patent incorporates?
Very much so. I would also say that it is of my opinion that gravity and various forms of, we could say, EM and gravity waves stem from an initial electromagnetic effect. Very much so. And this is what I mean by topology and stacked books, for example. So, say now if we have a book 1 to 10, but this time we're on book number 1, and we are only living, experiencing, and thinking about book number 1, we don't realize that there are another 9 books above us. And the only way in which the other 9 books can be observed, utilized, interacted with, etc., is if book number 1 meets a certain set of conditions. So, yes.
Okay, that's very interesting. Well, why don't you tell us about this announcement concerning this anti-gravity device, and why you feel that it's going to be a game changer?
Sure. Well, first, let me just say that I appreciate your giving me the opportunity to come on your show and announce this for the first time. For those that are already members of our Generation Z show on patreon.com/Generation Z, there are about approximately 30 members in which we've already begun in the last few weeks to start this initiative. But I am very proud and happy to announce for the first time publicly that we are at Generation Z and at SALT LLC, we are trying to develop a positive, we could say, ripple effect and or initiative of doing our best to bring this energy and these different types of energies, in which anti-gravity is certainly one of them, if we would like to call it that, to the forefront of the public in an attempt to bring this out for the better of humanity. Now, I would like to preface this with playing devil's advocate against myself right away. The first thing maybe is people may say is, well, Dave, why don't you spill the beans? Why is it that, there has to be some type of community involvement or what have you? Well, the reason, folks, first and foremost, is I'm going to be very blunt with all of you here. first and foremost, I don't want to go to jail for national security reasons, but I'm also in a position where I can speak much more openly and avidly than others to a very large degree. So what we are doing at patreon.com/Generation Z, and please know that it does not matter the tier in which you decide to select if you are interested in this, is we have different groups of people, or if you like to call them compartments, in which to a vastly large degree everyone is interacting with each other. We have multiple Zoom calls per week, and we are delving into different areas of this energy. And I am leaving and providing, I'm on all those calls, and I'm providing as many I guess you could say breadcrumbs, tidbits, you name it, as possible to help guide everyone in the right direction. And what I mean by that is there are certain people that are very interested in this energy from a sound perspective. There are certain people that are very interested in this energy from electromagnetic perspective. There are other people interested in this energy from a medical healing perspective. There's people interested in biofield areas. There's people interested in psychology, in doing reports or theses or essays in different regards. There's people interested in propulsion. And so I'm very excited to announce publicly that if anyone is interested, please head to patreon.com/Generation Z. We have 2 to 3 times per week group Zoom calls discussing this, about this. And we are also, as a matter of fact, we have a few members that have already started doing experiments. So we do experiments on the calls, all of this. Now, I am doing the absolute best I can while walking the line that I'm on, to essentially provide as much guidance as possible, but also we have a fun time while doing it too, right? So I always believe that the joys in the journey, we have to have fun. Now, with that said, there are some people that I am of the understanding, I don't know if they've tried yet, but there will be some people from, whether from certain areas of academia or otherwise, that may try and come out to, attack me or anything of the sort, to try and, you could say, ridicule or debunk me or anything like that. First off, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. To me, I don't lose sleep over it if anyone, calls me names or what have you. But for those that are saying, well, he doesn't know his science or anything like this, which at the moment, I don't think there are many, if at all. But if there are going to be any, I have some terms here that I've noted down as a friendly, I guess you could say, a very friendly warning to anyone that is trying to say that this science is not correct. And I'm going to use some keywords here, if I may. Some of them may be a little bit cryptic. They're made to be put out towards higher level individuals in the military that may try and come out to detract. So, and I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. So I'm going to list a few different keywords here, if I may. First off, Li and Yang, Nobel Prize, 1957. Heaviside. Whittaker, 1903-04. Third time derivative, stabilizing disequilibrium. Negentropy of gauge, as well as refractive indexes having to do with stimulated parametric down conversion. And finally, Operation Interloper. So those are some of the keywords, I guess you could say, that I wanted to bring up to basically send a respectful but strong message to anyone that is looking to create any, I guess you could say, negative intent or have a negative agenda towards what we're trying to do here. The objective with this initiative is to develop a positive ripple effect and to genuinely allow people to better themselves. And by doing that, by working on this energy, technology, knowledge in whatever area that you would like, you are by definition increasing the value of not just yourself, but of the work that you're working on, which is also why, in my opinion, if we look back at, we could say Newton, Nostradamus, we could say many different people, Leonardo da Vinci. Notice something, Doctor, which is that a lot of these individuals were not just scientists. They were philosophers, they were mathematicians, they were alchemists, they were writers, they were painters. And my humble theory is that once one begins to understand and interpret the underlying cause of what activates this anti-gravity and much more type of energy, you begin to realize that you can apply it to literally one's entire life. for better or worse. Now, I choose to do my best to utilize it in a positive regard. Hence, the initiative that I'm trying to bring forward here. But essentially, we're trying to put together basically a very positive, non-malevolent, non-violent, non-weaponizable version and initiative of bringing a lot of this technology to the forefront.
So just explain bringing anti-gravity to the world. I mean, that's a really big claim. So, I mean, is this what your invention, this patent application, is designed to do, or are we talking about much more that is happening on your Patreon channel?
Well, first off, actually, as a matter of fact, yes to both. It is first off, the patents are designed to induce those effects, but secondly, I'm also on the Patreon channel doing my absolute best to create a community where we can actually, in certain cases, safely develop this in, for example, say in people's garages, in their homes, etc., etc. That's the objective. And that is what I mean by a positive ripple effect. I want to be able to arm people with the appropriate knowledge to be able to interpret, absorb, understand, harness, and then utilize this. I don't even want to say technology. I would want to say more so um, energetic knowledge that can then be applied technologically. And if I could develop proof of concept, as I said on your show last time, with a couple $1,000s worth of parts and things like this, and I've already tried to give some breadcrumbs in this conversation here, I certainly believe that it is indeed possible for it to be done with others that are willing to learn. I would like to make a point in stating as well, Doctor, that to you and your lovely audience, if anyone is looking to inquire with respects to some type of, how do I say this very kindly, a sort of handout in terms of what the secret sauce is, there is a secret sauce. I will say that, but that this would be the wrong place to go to then. And I say that because the idea here is to help harness an understanding of oneself, which then helps them grow not just as a person, but helps them attain a whole new skill set they maybe never thought they had, and that cannot be acquired just by handing out, I guess you could say, the quote unquote secret sauce. Now, it's also very difficult for me to directly do that without facing strong litigious or legal repercussions, but I'm trying to do the absolute best that I can.
So just explain what the difference is between developing an invention using open source and distributing it through open source mechanisms where you have, literally people building these technologies in their garages, and everyone's building anti-gravity cars or ships or whatever in their garages because it's all open source, versus going down the route of a patent, which can be protected through the court system, and typically you can get, say, major institutional funders like a corporation saying, "Hey, we really like what you're doing, Dave. Here's X amount of dollars. We want to be able to kind of like develop this, and here's your kind of like funding, and you've got to sign these contracts." So, what makes, as far as this kind of an anti-gravity patent and what you're doing on the Patreon side, how does that reflect this kind of like, in a sense, I
Yeah.
wonder if it's a tension, or are they complementary?
Well, first off, thank you so much for the question. I would like to think that they're complementary, because it is of my humble understanding that there is a threshold, if you will, or an imaginary line in which there comes a point where certain things can be developed in the household and in the garage very safely. Precautions still need to be taken, but to a certain degree where it will not create certainly you can have fun with it within the vicinity of one's home or garage, but there are certain other elements that would require such to then be scaled up. And so the patents deal with a much more, dare I say, scaled up, quote unquote, intense version of this energy. So there is a threshold where, if basically I can provide as many tidbits and breadcrumbs as I can while walking a very, very fine line, the objective truthfully, is to have an individual, for example, within the group, or maybe more than one, stumble upon something during their experimentation. And if I can help, do my best to help sort of, give a wink, wink, nudge, nudge while walking a fine line in a hypothetical scenario, I would hypothetically do my best. If I may say very quickly, there's one gentleman who is already a part of our group on the Patreon who has, I don't want to say his name because I haven't asked beforehand to say it, but incredible guy. And he has essentially developed a situation in his home where he's used certain crystals, certain basic laser beams from Amazon, Faraday cage, handful of other devices that could be ordered off of Amazon and other areas. And he's induced certain effects already. And we actually plan to discuss it on our upcoming call and things like that. So there's certainly a lot of avenues that this can go in a positive regard.
Do you envisage mass production of this kind of device that can be purchased by people, where it can be used for generating this anti-gravity effect? I don't know whether we're talking about devices that will just begin to have that anti-gravity component, whether we're talking levitation, whether we're talking about flying cars, or whether we're talking about rocketry. I mean, is there some kind of mass production that is going to be made possible, or is in the process of being created through this patent application?
Well, let me say, with respects to my patent applications, there already have been certain individuals that have been highly interested in either purchasing the intellectual property from me, or I would license out the intellectual property to them. With that said, in terms of, I can only speak on what I know, and there already has been mass production. This is where it starts to get interesting, which is that, and this is what we do on our Zoom calls on the Patreon, which is I try and demonstrate to the group that a lot of this has been hidden in plain sight deliberately. For example, to give you one idea, some of the same underlying energies that are used in these anti-gravity craft or different devices or apparatuses, already we use them today. In some cases, they're called X-rays. They're also called MRIs, to a degree. So some of that is also understanding. That's part of the unfortunate disinformation campaign over the decades to confuse people as to what anti-gravity is. And there's certainly more than one way of tapping this energy, if you will. But that's why I'm trying to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff, as well as helping individuals whether better themselves via experimentation, wanting to we have another individual that wants to write a book on this within this field. So anything that could inspire human ingenuity and positive creativity in a certain regard, where even during experimentation the threshold is not crossed where it becomes a national security issue. And as a matter of fact, I can say that there are certain companies, of which actually I can provide to you, Doctor, after this recording, that are already out there, that are just they're out there, but not too many people know of them. But they're there, and they're using this energy.
Well, I recall the Otis car development of anti-gravity powered spacecraft, and he called it the OTC X1, and he actually did apply and was granted a patent for that, and it was shut down because of national security. But it had little to do with what we would consider national security, in terms of people using this to kind of like develop some kind of dangerous weapon. It was more that it threatened the financial foundations of the United States, because this kind of anti-gravity technology, if it were released, the fossil fuel industry would collapse.
Yep.
All these major companies and the hundreds of thousands of people they employ would also cease to exist. So that was deemed to be justification for shutting it down. So when you're talking about our national security and this kind of anti-gravity device, Uh, is that what really is at stake here? That it's something that could threaten the current financial and kind of like energy industry?
Oh, I'm just gonna say it bluntly. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's indiscernible from what our ancestors called magic. We just call it quantum today, in my opinion. There's they won't be able to control it. But I also don't think that that should be reason to censor and block this stuff as well. Now, with that said, I also understand that there comes a particular point where this under this knowledge and understanding and technology can be weaponized, which is one of the reasons that we're doing this on the Patreon, because I want to get to know the individuals that are interested in wanting to do this, because this is not something with a handful of adjustments, weaponization is possible when you cross that threshold that we spoke of earlier. Again, it doesn't take much. So yeah, yes. And also, if I may say as well, with respects to Otis Carr, a lot of those methodologies are harnessed and utilized within some of the patents that you've seen privately of mine, as well as some of a good chunk of what we discuss on our Patreon calls with respects to this new initiative.
Can you say anything about any corporations that you're working with to kind of like mass produce or to develop or refine these inventions?
Unfortunately, I can't go into much detail at the moment, other than they certainly don't reside within the United States. You, that's the most that I could say at the moment. What I can say is that there's an internal, in my opinion, internal battle going on of various elements of the military, various elements of private industry. They're trying to figure out how this can come out without losing the control of the dissemination of not just the knowledge, but the applicate, like the technology itself. Because once this is understood, everyone can, for lack of a better description, truly be free. And so I'm trying to truly toe that line of trying to bring this out while also not providing anyone with the means to do negative things with it.
Okay. Well, I guess the question a lot of people will have, well, how can I participate in this? I mean, are you really saying that if people want to participate, they have to essentially subscribe to your Patreon channel to kind of like go further in learning about this process and
As
getting access?
At the moment, yes, and I will explain the reason for that. The reason for such is because I have attempted in the past to do some public initiatives and efforts on my public YouTube channel and in other areas as well. They have been deliberately thwarted by, I'll just say, in military intelligence, to ensure that those certain initiatives could not be progressed and made. So again, people may say, well, he's just looking to make money. Well, first, let me say that at the end of the day, we all need to pay our bills. But at the same time, this is definitely not a route to take if I was trying to look for a get rich quick type situation, if you will. So that's where I stand on that.
Okay, all right. So, earlier attempts to just kind of make this public domain from the outset, led to big problems. Yeah, I mean, this is a big issue that I know people. Dan Willis, who I know you've worked with, and I've interviewed him a few times. Uh, Dr. Stephen Greer have dealt with this tension between the inventor coming up with a device. On the one hand, Dr. Greer recommended going down that kind of like public domain, making it available as some kind of open source. But on the other hand, inventors have a natural desire to protect their intellectual property, coming up with patents and so forth. But Greer has said that often this has led to unfortunate outcomes for these inventions or the inventors, and then the inventions never come out. So have you found a kind of third way to ensure that this doesn't happen to you?
There's been, in the last handful of months and last handful of small years, there have been certain occurrences behind the scenes where, again, as I said to yourself and to your fantastic producer before we started this, it seems like there's an opportunity for a permanent, deliberate, positive change to occur. What I'm trying here is one approach. Now, to play devil's advocate, many have said the same thing that I'm saying right now in decades prior. So, what I would say to that is, let us allow the coming months and the next 2 to 3 years. Let's allow time to genuinely tell. And in the meantime, I'm going to be doing everything that I can to genuinely lift and elevate people spiritually and physically and in many other ways to I guess you could say be invigorated or reinvigorated and positively excited about this energy, this technology, what it can do, and not just discuss it, but let's start experimenting in the homes, in the garages for those that are interested, and let's see what we can do. That actually, if it's all right with you, Doctor, that takes me to the next 2 or 3 images, if that's all right. And
Please.
it doesn't necessarily matter which one comes first or last. I'll just go through each one as you scroll through them or as they come up. Right, what we're looking at here has to do with some individuals of whom I've had the pleasure of meeting. Some of the ones that have contributed to this particular work here, which is that what we're looking at here is basically a man-made or human-made ear in the laboratory. Whether that is something from an ethical perspective, that's a different conversation. But what we're seeing in particular is a vortex or spiral or chirality spin-like coil within the ear. This enables what is being called, or what we will soon know to be in the mainstream news, quantum point-to-point communication. For those that may be wondering, is this something that has, how long have they been sitting on this for? I'm going to wager, in terms of modern history, not probably 1960s approximately, perhaps a little bit prior. But ultimately, what's being used here are electromagnetic gravitational waves to be used for instantaneous communication that travel at light speed. And this goes back to that subway example I gave much earlier in our conversation. And so this is a laboratory image of essentially a version of such. What you're seeing here are some images in which I have shared a little while ago on the Patreon, which has to do with when I had built one of the original devices of mine. That's actually, if you could go back one picture, if that's all right, you could see my hand as I get, thank you, as I get close to the device, it begins to start to create an electrical spark and charge, which speaks to this idea that we as humans are organic electromagnetic capacitors. And it gets very interesting. And the next image has to do with a stabilization of what we could or would call. I try and be very careful with the words here, but what we could call, dare I say, some type of levitation or quantum locking, as it's been called. That takes place with an effect of some plasmas and what have you. Again, there's no necessarily wrong way of doing such. The more creative you get, the more fun you can have with this. So these are just some images that I would like to preview, in which we again showcase and discuss in much more detail and insight. Of course, on our show, on the main show, Generation Z, but mainly on the patreon.com/Generation Z. And of course, this is what I now do consulting for with Salt LLC, in an attempt now to try and complement both ends of such.
Now, you describe this as being some kind of levitation effect. So this is related to the gravity generation, or the anti-gravity generator?
Precisely, yes.
Generated?
This was actually the home. These are pictures of some of the we could say homemade devices that I was working on with the initial $2,000 when I had first come on your show to discuss such. So just wanted to give a sneak peek or a preview to yourself and to your incredible audience of some legitimacy to the fact that this is indeed possible to do and to induce within the household without a laboratory or anything like this. This particular image here is a snapshot of a document that has to do with an understanding that human beings, to me, this speaks to a much grander, not just anti-gravity, but to a much grander perspective of human beings are able to be human behavior for better or worse is up to the individual that wields the knowledge and the resources, but human behavior can be modeled electrically. It has been found privately, I will say, but there are certain people that want this to go public. It has been found that human behavior can be modeled, and we're talking not just the stock market, we're talking about people going shopping, certain actions people are going to take can in fact be modeled and predicted of what moves will be next electrically, from an electrical engineering perspective. So one of the reasons I bring this up is because people always talk about, oh, the phenomenon, whether it's paranormal or UAP or what have you. The phenomenon is always one step ahead of us, so to speak, right? They always know what we're going to do before we do it. Well, it's possible that what we're seeing here with respects to this document is an example of how certain approaches could be taken, where some of these beings, whether extraterrestrial or crypto-terrestrial, interdimensional, or even say us, so to speak, from the future, or even presently a breakaway civilization of sorts, you name it, can predict certain human behavior, whether it's one person, whether it's a town, whether it's a whole city. It certainly can be approximated at the very least. And so what I'm trying to demonstrate with this particular document here is to give a taste, if you will, to yourself, Doctor, and to your audience of what we delve into on the Patreon and in our group Zoom calls much more extensively. And this is, yeah.
Well, just to point out, this is not new. I mean, psychological warfare has been around for decades. Certainly during the Second World War and immediately afterwards. I mean, there were major operations based on psychological warfare that were very much about being able to predict the way populations would behave if they were given information or stimuli in a certain way. So that's been around for a long, long time. And I guess you're saying that diagram is showing how that's done using some kind of electromagnetic stimuli?
Basically, the same way that anti-gravitic effects are induced from a nuts and bolts perspective are the same way that one can then predict what a human is going to do next behaviorally.
You want to explain that a little better, just elaborate.
Oh, sure. So in other words, the underlying energetic principles that cause a craft to we could say levitate or tap the 0 point or tap the ether to do the effects that they do. The same, I guess you could say, the certain things that we see of even paranormal activities or healing orbs of people having cancers healed and more positive experiences, all of that directly connect to this not necessarily this particular document itself, but to the underlying principle of this document and of what it entails. And let me give you a practical example. For example, we will say the stock market, let's say. We know, as you said, doctor, that the electrical stimulation certainly causes some type of effect. It's been studied by many, many different contractors, military and otherwise. But what's interesting is that there is in my humble opinion, from what I can find, a lack of description of how the effect electrically occurs in the ether as it affects the person's behavior. It is fluctuating in a toroidal type geometry. And what's interesting is that even in the absence of electric and magnetic fields anywhere in the world, in a lab or in the everyday life of a person, even if you were to walk into a room, let's say, where there's no electricity, no magnetism in the room whatsoever, there is another component, another type of energy that picks up the slack, for lack of a better term, of what the electricity was going to induce to the person behaviorally. And that same alternative energy is the same energy that is emitted from a anti-gravity pulse.
Maybe one way of understanding this is that I know from many contactee reports that extraterrestrial spacecraft where the extraterrestrial pilot, interfaces with the technology through their thought waves. So to have gotten to that point in terms of the development of such craft, at some point in that civilization's development, they would have had to go through something similar to that diagram that you described, where they mapped out how human behavior and stimuli are going to in some way correspond or be triggered by electromagnetic waves. And once you understand that more clearly, then you are ready to produce craft that are responsive to the brain waves of the crew.
Very well said, doctor. I would very strongly agree. I would certainly say that is not the only avenue to take. It is a very significant one. And I think you explained it very eloquently and very well there. Yes.
Okay, so is now a good time, I think, to go to this second patent, because I know a lot of people are very interested in the healing aspects of some of these technologies that you're involved in and that people have been talking about coming out soon. And this second patent is called the Quartz crystal scalar wave transmission of human DNA. And so you want to explain exactly how that operates?
Sure, absolutely. There's something that I will say for the first time publicly, in which is we pursue and we discuss privately on the members section of the show, which has to do with something called linguistic wave genetics. In other words, there is direct correlation, and has been substantiated academically, except it's been done more so in countries outside of the United States and the West. In North America and in the West, it's considered, as I understand it, sensitive, restricted, classified, you name it. But it's something that I'm not limited to in terms of what I could discuss, which is that this term linguistic wave genetics, there is a direct correlation between the immune system, in which seems to be acting as an organ in and of itself, the memory of every action, thought, movement you take that the immune system stores, sort of like the body's personal akashic records library, if you will. And essentially, one can tap that energy and use it as a map, blueprint, schematic to understand a person's medical issues and how to resolve those issues. And I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, doctor. There are many avenues that this particular patent could take with respects to linguistic wave genetics. What that basically means is a fancy way for saying words, thought, and intent can, in fact, alter matter, can heal, and a lot more than that. So I'll stop right now and see where you want to go with this, because this can go in many different areas.
Thoughts, words, and intent can actually influence the way matter is transformed, and that's directly relevant to health. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, I mean, human DNA is in a way a kind of communication. I mean, it's a coded set of information that is being constantly transmitted around the body. So, is this where you have this kind of a healing effect being created because human DNA, the desirable or the optimal? I mean, exactly how, what kind of biological DNA is necessary for this invention to work?
Sure. Well, first off, let me say that it is of my opinion and understanding that, based on the consulting work and the research that I've done and still do, and the research and development, that the more, and this actually has to do with even my announcement of the initiative that I'm trying to do, the more of a positive ripple effect we can effectuate to the masses, the more in which and what I mean by positive ripple effect is not people believing blindly what I or others say, but simply being open to pursuing this area of different thinking, thought, energy, all of that. Is that the more people begin to, for lack of a better term, think outside the box and or wake up, the more of an effect we have on matter, basically. As a matter of fact, I would say that Mr. Dan Winter, whom you had interviewed recently, I was listening to fantastic conversation, and he had brought up something about hurricanes or tornadoes, and people causing people's emotional distress, causing such like certain weather issues and all of that. And I would very strongly agree. And that would be one example of how human intent can effectuate matter. Now, it can be done on an individual scale. As a matter of fact, it has to do with the human biofield. When the human body gets into a particular, we could say, relaxed or meditative state, which is this idea of, we could say, blissful or pure balance in relaxation. And once that state is induced, the human biofield then latches or locks in, just like the plasma arc that we were looking at in the image prior. It begins just like it was what they call in mainstream media today, quantum physics. Your biofield, which is a toroidal field, but circular nonetheless in its entirety, latches in or locks in, regardless of where these other people or energies are, locks in with other people's, we could say, resonant effects. And that is what, to a lot of, in my opinion, when many people, you meet someone for the first time and you say, man, this person is vibing with me, or this person is on my wavelength. It is precisely that exact energy in which is locking in to create that resonant effect where people, in fact, find that connection energetically. And then they do, dare I say, their biofields overlap. Now, what's interesting is that if you look at two human biofields overlapping, you begin to realize you are forming not just the caduceus visually, but you're also forming the DNA, the double helix DNA structure of the human body. And you're also forming what's called the, I guess you could say, the parameters and the boundaries of what are called red shift and blue shift in the electromagnetic spectrum, which is the same color that is seen when UFOs are coming close to the ground and then when they're leaving as well.
So this patent that applies to, there's an invention that you have here. So when it's transmitting this human DNA and via some resonant genetic transference work non-locally, I mean, how is that being done? I mean, how do you transport or communicate or transmit human DNA from one part? I know you've kind of like been given that example. Well, maybe I can better articulate what I'm trying to say. I'm thinking, okay, like if you have a tuning fork and you
Right.
have a tuning fork that begins vibrating, you have another tuning fork that isn't vibrating, the one that's vibrating will start to induce a frequency response in the idle tuning fork, and then they're both going to start vibrating. So, yes, there's something that's transmitting the frequency from one tuning fork to the other. So, is this along the lines of what it is that you've developed here in this paper?
Yes. So if I may say, essentially, if my hand here were to be the surface of or of our reality, if you will, and anything underneath the surface, sort of like the New York subway example, would be running through the ether faster than how we perceive the speed of light. What is essentially happening here, doctor, is, say, for example, we have a cancer cell. And if we were to use the 10 stacked books again example, and the cancer cell is, say, on book 10 in our reality, we then have an ability where there are another 9 books. It's actually infinite, but the potential, they're called potentials. They're infinite, but another 9 books in this example below it. And say book number, I don't know, 5 represents a point in time based on the body's immune akashic records, where immune system akashic records memory, where that cell that is now cancerous was once very healthy. What that device essentially does is take the resonant information structures from when the cell was healthy in book 5 and bring it to book 10 at the very top, and then replace the cancerous cell literally with, dare I say, a sort of time reversal method of the information structures of within the cell itself. That also is a form of topology and many other things, but hopefully that's one way of describing it, if I may. Unfortunately, I can't delve into the practical materials that are used, but I can tell you that it has to do with light. It has to do with certain types of quartz crystals. Um, it has to do with let's see here. Uh, Definitely certain types of mirrors, if you will. But that's unfortunately that's the farthest extent that I could go at the moment.
So this patent application, you've actually developed the device or are working on a some device that is based on this quartz crystal scalar wave transmission of human DNA. So you actually have a device, or you're working on a device, and is this something that people who go to your Patreon channel, that they get to hear about that, or is it, again, do we kind of wait for this patent to be granted, and then, like, you make a follow-up announcement that here are my patents, they're now being made available, you can download them, and you want to attract funders? I mean, exactly how
Sure.
is this going to work?
Sure. So at the moment, I'm in the process of developing the device. There are a few pieces that have already been assembled, and so far everything has been verified based on the theoretical hypothesis. With that said, though, I can tell you that I'm in direct correspondence with other academics from Eastern Europe and other places like Turkey and elsewhere who have, in fact, let me say, who may have developed this with full success, that may or may not be aiding me in my development of such. So, in other words, I am very let me say as well that um, I have and will be presenting to certain individuals, certain academics from around the world, this concept, because the knowledge of this is not anything, so to speak, that is new, but because of the compartmentalization of the military-industrial complex over the many decades, maybe, to my knowledge at least, maybe 1/100th of the entire military, let alone the U.S. government, even knew this existed. So it's an attempt to try and bring this forward, present it to certain individuals that would have the knowledge, that would want to take it to the next level, whether it's licensing out the intellectual property or actually working alongside them. But I am in the process of working on assembling such, and I'm probably about 35% of the way there.
Well, I know a lot of people are waiting for some radical new medical technologies coming online. I mean, there's a lot of kind of rumors, discussion about med beds being created on places like the moon, and that they're being mass produced with the assistance of extraterrestrials. So this quantum crystal scalar wave transmission device, is that in any way uh, kind of like in harmony with that? Is any connection? I mean, because you have
Yes.
own experiences with extraterrestrials, so yeah, is there kind of any correspondence?
I would certainly encourage people not to discount crystalline structures and quartz crystals. Yes, very much so. Very much so. Um, I think that, for example, I'm doing my best to not use the word quantum, because I think, like myself and many others, it sort of disturbs people in the sense that we don't really know what it means. Okay, we can say that, a quanta by, Max Planck, that was the term because he was able to quantize and quantify the smallest bit of elementary particles at the smallest level that we could get. But there comes a point even then where it's just, the word quantum is just being thrown around all over the place. So, yes, as a matter of fact, I would say that this would be I guess you could say a piece or a percentage of what these med beds may in fact entail to a certain degree. Now, I want to be very clear in saying that I am not the know all and be all of how this of certain areas of how this energy works. I'm still a student of this energy and this knowledge myself, but can very strongly say, I would say, yes, this is certainly a good slice of that pie, of the medbed pie.
Hmm. Well, with regard to both of these patent applications that you've submitted, when, I mean, we can't reveal those applications at the moment, you requested them not to be revealed. At what point can they be revealed?
I'm pretty confident. I would say within the year, truthfully. In addition to others as well.
So within the next 6 months, you anticipate, that these 2 patents and possibly some of the others that you've submitted, those applications, that they'll be released. Now, I guess the next question is, will they be granted, and is that important for this to become public or to be disseminated?
Well, truth be told, I can first off, let me say that in the next 6 to 12 months, if I may, um, and I actually may, in fact, if you'd be so gracious, may in fact come back on the show when it's time to reveal the details of them and such. But the Sorry, could you repeat the question again? Forgive. Oh, the does it matter if it's granted or not? I can tell you right now that it doesn't, because there are those on the inside, and when I mean inside, I mean military, private industry, you name it, whether in the West or otherwise or elsewhere, that they know for a fact these mechanisms do work, and for them it's not so much about was the patent granted or not. And I mean, for example, with the utmost respect to Dr. Sal Paez, who I have nothing but immense respect for, his patents were granted, and people still call nonsense on them today. So, I don't think it necessarily matters, and I say that because there have already been many individuals and different groups of interest that I've already begun to, I guess you could say, license out the property to, and what have you. So it doesn't necessarily matter. But I mean, it's actually an interesting point, Doctor, because the Otis car inventions were granted, the John Bedini patents were granted. So it's interesting to see what'll happen in this in this particular regard.
Well, that raises a very interesting question. I mean, you discussed, the Bedini patents and the Salvador Payas patents being granted, and of course, Otis Carr's patent for the OTC X1 was granted. But then, on the other hand, we know that the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has imposed secrecy orders on over 6,000 patent applications, and many of these have to do with anti-gravity, free energy, and some of these advanced healing modalities. So I guess the question is, if your invention does work, and especially the latter one in terms of the quartz crystal healing, would that be something that could have a national security order imposed on it, or have you been assured that won't happen?
This is partly why we're doing what we're doing with this new initiative I've announced. Because if we're trying to cover as many angles as we can so that we don't put ourselves in a corner.
Okay,
With
because
this.
as I understand it, if a national secrecy order is placed on a patent application, then the inventor is restricted from talking about that and sharing that. But through your Patreon channel, you've taken the preemptive action of already disseminating these principles. So, in a sense, that you've created like a moat, or you've protected yourself against someone coming along and saying, "Well, we're imposing a national secrecy order on this because it's not possible now because of what you've done."
The idea, exactly, and the idea is that if I get muzzled, the work continues on. That's what's most important, in my opinion, that the work and the knowledge be carried on, but not in a way where people are just going through the motions. People need to, in my opinion, they need to understand, they need to feel, they need to interpret in their own way, respectively, the understanding of this underlying energy that they can then take and use for themselves. And that's my attempt, one angle of a positive ripple effect. I think that, again, if this were 5 years ago, I think even 3 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do this, let alone come on your show and make such an announcement. But hopefully things will stay permanently adjusted. And if not, as I've said, we're trying as many angles as we can.
Okay, so as far as people wanting to see the effects of these inventions that you've been working on and that you've been disseminating through this group on Patreon and through your patent applications, when can people maybe see the fruits of that? I mean, when can they go to their local store, or will there be some marketing mechanism put in place where they could buy an anti-gravity device, a free energy device, or some kind of crystal healing device that are a direct byproduct of these patent applications?
I'm going to be honest with you, doctor. I there are discussions behind the scenes right now, to my understanding, of how some of that could be brought forward, but I'm not putting my reliance, or I'm not going to become complete. I guess you could say, I'm not going to rest or stand on the shoulders of these corporations, because of the bureaucracy and all this kind of stuff, and the different politics and agendas that individuals have. The idea, essentially, I am speaking with certain smaller manufacturers to see if this can be, I guess you could say, developed on a grander level, because granted, yes, there are people that are not interested in the building of this stuff, and just want to purchase it, which is completely understandable. But this is also something that we're trying to do on our Patreon with respects to the content that we produce. We do, I write papers, I write Substacks, I record my own episodes, where we try and describe to the best of my degree, and to what I can, um, a way of thinking that can allow people to notice, okay, there is a company out there that is offering this. And I say that because there are people and there are companies out there that already offer these services and products. They can't really be super loud about it, because they'll get shut down for political reasons. But I'm hopeful in the next few years we'll see something on a much more grander scale be ushered out. But I'm not putting all my eggs in that one basket.
So as far as bringing anti-gravity to the world, this is the special announcement that you want to make in the interview today. I mean, what you're doing, as far as I can tell, is stimulating a kind of organic grassroots effort for people to get engaged, to start building these devices, sharing the information, and ensuring that these inventions are not something that can be easily shut down by the powers that be, whatever's left of them, or and in the meantime, you're utilizing the US Patent and Trademark Office to try to have some recognition or protection given to some of the inventions, the ideas that are growing out of these realizations. But you're trying to generate a kind of grassroots awakening where inventors come together and develop these devices, and you're kind of like trying to inspire them, show the way, with these patent applications. Am I kind of on the right track there?
Absolutely, doctor. And you worded that very well, and I appreciate that. The patent applications are simply my own twist on the fundamental understanding of these energies, knowledge, and technology. Now, what I'm trying to do is provide, basically, when people first come to the Patreon, I ask them, what is your interest? And I don't mean about UFOs or science in general. Some people come to me, they say music. Other people say, I like to paint. We then work with that skill and take that skill and hone it, and then apply it to the fundamental principles of understanding how anti-gravity works. And then we've already had a couple people in the group, and it's only been a handful of weeks, go, I see. And then some have showed me privately some things they've built, and they're very close. Others have are more interested in the psychological side of things, and they've written papers, and they said, Dave, what do you think? And I've passed those papers on to academics. So the goal here is to truthfully help people develop and understand and build anti-gravitic capabilities, and also take, again, by bettering themselves and taking it to that next level.
So again, where do people go to talk to you, to share their ideas, and to maybe learn how to do some of these experiments or read your papers? Is it just to the Patreon side? Again, read that out for us.
Sure. Well, people can email me at GenZed podcast at gmail.com. The reason I don't always get to everyone's emails, and I deeply apologize, it is quite a full inbox, and I'm very grateful of such. But patreon.com/Generation Z, no space, no capitals. It doesn't matter the tier in which you select. That is precisely the avenue for people to go. I tried some while ago to do this in a public forum and public regard. The problem was, as I said to you just a handful of minutes ago, Doctor, too many individuals looking to detract, looking to stir up nonsense for the sake of stirring up nonsense, and to get people to not focus on actually developing these capabilities is what's caused me to shift it to the Patreon and do a sort of grander re-announcement of this, if you will. And then, because again, the idea is that essentially people, unless they're professionals looking to sow disinformation, are not going to spend $8 a month, for example, just to be a troll or to cause issues. And if they do, then I have mechanisms put in place to at a different level to deter such individuals.
Well, it certainly makes sense. I think there's a lot of good reason for why you would want to exclude the trolls or those that are there to kind of disrupt, and creating a channel, a Patreon account where people can just go and subscribe and be part of this grassroots awakening, revolution, perhaps, given the radicalness of the ideas. I mean, these ideas have been around a long time. But certainly, you are part of a new generation putting these out. Certainly, we have confidence in the kind of contacts you've had, the way in which some renowned scientists, and you shared their names with me and shared some of their communications with me. So I know some highly renowned scientists are working with you and recognize that you do have abilities that are very unique, and this is quite remarkable, given that it's only quite recently that you've displayed this profound understanding of mathematical formulas describing esoteric principles that are of interest to people within the secret space programs. So that got my attention, and I know it Elena Danan also kind of like felt the same way. So I certainly encourage people to go along to Dave's Patreon site, patreon.com Generation Z, sign up and learn. And if you have something that you've been working on, or you feel inspired to build something yourself, you're probably with the right-minded people. And I think there is a kind of a coherence, a thought coherence that happens when like-minded people come together. You're all dedicated to building these types of technologies. You're in a protected space, and I think it is good that you're in a protected space rather than somewhere like YouTube or Telegram where you have trolls. That Patreon does give you the means to protect the information, and of course you want to get serious people there, and so I think a kind of minimal or nominal financial contribution, there's nothing wrong with that.
And if I may say as well, Doctor, for one last word, and I appreciate you explained that so eloquently and laid that out very well. If I may say as well that other than paying my bills, the Patreon funds go directly to, and will now be going to, investing in some very hefty equipment that I actually, as a matter of fact, will be bringing to my place of residence, to the extent that I can, to demonstrate in these calls as well with others that have their own experiments at their own locations, to again enable these effects. And if I may say one last thing, Doctor, I want to thank you immensely for having me on. And the reason for this is because when I was, I guess you could say, when these capabilities arose or manifested within me with respects to being able to grasp all of this, whether theoretically or practically, experimentally, I feel that if I stay quiet about this, and if I just, kind of go away and silence, quiet up and go into my corner of the world, it would make me no different than the big corporations that are trying to cover this stuff up. So I think that there's a fine line that should be walked. That's my opinion, but that should not mean that that this should be suppressed. And I think that's I'm of the humble, this is just a theory with no evidence to back it, but my intuition is telling me that this is part of the reason why I have acquired such capabilities, to spread it, not to suppress it.
Well, I want to thank you, Dave, for your dedication to bringing out some remarkable inventions and your insights into how these operate, and inspiring people to get involved, because you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, people are sitting back saying, when are the med beds going to come online? When is the anti-gravity going to become operational? I think you're kind of like challenging people, calling them out, saying, if you want this to happen, then join in. Bring your collective energies and thoughts to make this all very real. And you're giving them a focal point to do that through your through that website that you've created on Patreon. So again, thank you for coming on the show and making your special announcement.
Thank you, Doctor, so very much.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.